What the Trump campaign hyped would be a raucous return to the campaign trail for President Trump turned out to be a major disappointment for the campaign. While the Trump re-election effort boasted it would fill the Bank of Oklahoma Center that seats more than 19,000 people, the Tulsa fire marshal tells NBC News that 6,200 supporters ultimately filled the general elections section of the enclosed arena. Trump campaign spokesman Tim Murtaugh blamed small numbers on, quote, radical protesters and the news media, who he said had frightened away supporters. But there were few protests in the area and no sizable effort to block entrances. And there was a strong security presence. According to The Times, some users of social media said on Saturday night that teenagers helped keep attendance at the rally down by seeking tickets they did not intend to use. TikTok and Twitter users posted that they had registered potentially hundreds of thousands of tickets for Trump's rally as a prank after the campaign tweeted asking supporters to register for free tickets. But Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale pushed back against those reports, issuing a statement yesterday saying the campaign weeded out tens of thousands of bogus cell phone numbers ahead of the rally. But, quote, these phony ticket requests never factor into our thinking for possible crowd size.
And also, as I think it was the Times or the Washington Post said, these are general admission events. If people want to get into the event, they can get into the event.
Well, they have to hit that disclaimer. Yeah. I don't know if that made a difference, but if they contracted coronavirus. Meanwhile, in an interview on Fox News yesterday, Trump campaign advisor Mercedes Schlapp argued that the turnout was lower than expected because the president's supporters were concerned about protests outside the venue turning violent.
The key here is that is important is to understand, and I had this with my own personal family who lives not far away from Tulsa, that they were concerned. There were factors involved, like they were concerned about the protesters who were coming in. There were protesters who blocked the mags. And so we saw that have an impact in terms of people coming to the rally.
The fact is the president talks about the attendance at his events. As we all know, he made a big issue of the attendance at his inauguration. He talks about how he can fill an arena and that Joe Biden can't. He didn't fill an arena last night, and you guys were so far off. If I may finish, and you guys were so far off that you had planned an outdoor rally, and there wasn't an overflow crowd. And watching the coverage and talking to Mark Meredith on the ground today, protesters did not stop people from coming to that rally. The fact is,
oh, absolutely, they did.
People didn't show up.
I'm telling you, there were people. I'm telling you, there were people and families that didn't want to, couldn't bring their children because of concerns of the protesters.
President Trump was reportedly left fuming over the lackluster attendance. Upon his arrival on Air Force One, Trump was, quote, furious and laid into his aides over the sparse crowds. For people familiar with what took place at the event tell the New York Times that the president was stunned and continued to yell at aides backstage while looking at the endless rows of empty seats. Two White House and campaign officials tell the Associated Press that Trump was upset that he had been led to believe he would see huge crowds in deep red Oklahoma. Officials note that although there was no sign of an imminent staff shakeup, members of Trump's inner circle angrily questioned how campaign manager Brad Parscale and other senior aides could so wildly overpromise and underdeliver. According to The Times, several White House officials called the rally a disaster and an unforced error that heightened tensions among some of the president's government advisors and his campaign aides.
So, Jonathan Lemire, as fantastic Mr. Fox would say, this is amateur night in Dixie. I mean, you actually have a campaign that is pushing the 1 million number repeatedly. We're told that they're going to be rallies. They're going to be outside festivals. This is going to be like nothing we've ever seen. And again, those were false expectations set up by the Trump campaign itself. Question number one, how did the campaign so badly miscalculate? And secondly, What does Donald Trump do next? Does he risk having another rally where he has a weak performance? It would seem to me the campaign has a lot to figure out this morning.
So Saturday night in Tulsa was meant to be a defiant show of force from President Trump. They were expecting to draw huge crowds in a deep red state with a very friendly, Trump-friendly governor there in Oklahoma. They wanted to be able to send the signal that Americans could start going back to normal, to start as another sign of reopening the country amid a pandemic, that they could have a large gathering indoors. They ignored the health warnings of the president's own coronavirus task force, as well as state officials, because they thought they could draw a big crowd that would not only be a sign that the president still had this sort of drawing power, they thought it could reassure nervous Republicans who were looking at the polls and worried about holding on to not just the White House, but the Senate. And they also wanted to re-energize the president himself, who has been so wildly off message and all over the place during the pandemic, the clearing of Lafayette Square just over my shoulder here, and so on. But instead what they got a lot of questions, and they faced a lot of empty seats. Even before the president touched down in Tulsa, let's remember, 6 members of his own staff, it was announced, had come down with the coronavirus in Tulsa while preparing for the rally, showing that the virus's reach could go into the very ranks of the president's staff yet again. Of course, we know some of the White House have also been infected. They had hoped to have an overflow room. They had hoped to draw over 100,000 people there. And yes, there's discussion about social media pranks and TikTok teens. And campaign advisors I talked to say maybe that inflated some of the numbers, but they still thought they were going to get a big crowd. And at the end of the day, the people just didn't show up, leaving the president furious, campaign aides pointing fingers at each other. And to your point, Joe, real questions as to what comes next. We know that the campaign had planned this week to finalize the date of the president's next rally, maybe even 2, and they'd be announced soon thereafter. It's unclear whether those proceedings are going to go forward. He is going to be traveling this week to Arizona and to Wisconsin, but those are not for campaign events. In fact, tomorrow he's going to visit his border wall. But right now, it goes to show his real vulnerabilities. Because beyond drawing the empty seats, it's his message from the rally stage, Joe, as a final point. He still is scrambling and fumbling to come deliver strong, concise, effective attacks on Joe Biden. And there was no attempt, no mention of national unity, no attempt to address the crises facing this nation. He downplayed the pandemic and did not mention the name of George Floyd even once.
It was a rambling, strange speech, even by Donald Trump standards. And it seemed like he was testing out material, most of it seeming to fall flat. And Bob Costa, you and Philip Rucker wrote in the Washington Post that this event symbolized the beleaguered state of the Trump presidency. After June 1st, after all the problems of the past several months, this was supposed to be Donald Trump breaking out. Instead, it looked more like a campaign broken down. What happened?
For weeks now, inside the Trump campaign, inside the Republican National Committee, there has been a push, as Jonathan said so well, to return to rallies, a pressure on the president to get out there to tell his own story. And at its core, the return to rallies, politically speaking, is an effort to make this election not a referendum on President Trump's record, but a choice between him and Vice President Biden. And many of the president's top political advisors were hoping on Saturday night that the president would test out line after line against Vice President Biden to tear into his record, his persona. And he did do that, but it often came about 45 minutes to an hour into his presentation on Tulsa, after an extended riff about his remarks at West Point to the cadets and other grievances with the media. And this leaves both logistically and politically the Trump orbit reeling at this moment on Monday morning, not sure what to do next. Older Americans are very concerned, I'm told by top Trump advisors, about coming to these rallies, even if they want to, because of health concerns, not fear of protesters, but fear about hurting themselves and contracting the coronavirus. So maybe airplane hangars or airport tarmacs have to be the future of Trump events. And then message-wise, they don't come out of Tulsa with a stinging attack on Biden. The focus instead on the crowds.
A couple of things, Joe. First of all, apparently Trump was reportedly angry that the 6 campaign advance team members who contracted coronavirus He was angry that that was released. Obviously, he talked on stage about not wanting to do testing, so we wouldn't get more information, which is downright crazy and dangerous. And, obviously, the Trump campaign would have never done this, but they missed an opportunity to social distance. They had those empty seats. They could have spread people out so that more coronavirus wouldn't be spread inside that arena. Instead, everyone was crushed on the lower bank of seats so that it could look full, which was increasing the risk, of course, that more people in Tulsa would contract the virus.
Well, you heard what the president said at the rally. You heard him bragging about tamping down testing.
Wow.
And his campaign aides rushing out saying it was a joke actually makes things even worse for 120,000 Americans, likely 150,000 Americans dead by the time of the campaign itself.
Yeah.
I think historians are going to look back, political scientists are going to look back and ask why this president at the end of February decided that he was going to run against a pandemic, because he's not running against Joe Biden. He's not running against protesters. He's running against a pandemic. And has said time and again, it was one person coming in from China. It was 15 people. It was going to go away. It's not coming back in the fall. It is coming back in the fall. In fact, it's coming back right now. We had so many people and a lot of my friends that got out crowing about Ron DeSantis. Where does Ron DeSantis go for his apology?
Yeah.
Nowhere. He goes the same place a baseball coach goes in the second inning of a game for an apology. This is, as every doctor who knows, or scientist or epidemiologist knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
This is a 9-inning game. We're not even halfway through the game based on the smartest minds in America who Donald Trump has ignored to disastrous results, especially for our senior citizens. Florida's numbers are higher than they've ever been. Ron DeSantis is now admitting himself it's not the testing that's making the numbers go up. It's the fact that more people are getting coronavirus. So Donald Trump has set himself up as a man who has decided he's going to run against a pandemic and tell people that the pandemic's going to magically go away.
And he's asking those 6,200 people to join him in his fantastical thinking with 120,000 people dead and with this virus spreading that it's going to fade away. These are people that he asked to click on a disclaimer that just in case they got it at this rally, the Trump campaign wouldn't be held liable. This is asking for a lot, I think.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.